involved in the real estate industry for the past number of years knows that it has not been easy rowing. In fact, it's required a certain level of stamina and mindset and leadership. And on today's episode, we're celebrating Veterans Day. This is live, being streamed live on Veterans Day. We have a very important veteran with us here today who leads an incredible company that helps leaders like you to lead under pressure. So we're going to get into that. It's going to be a great episode. And I would strongly encourage you to hang with us because today you're going to learn about how to lead under pressure. So the big question is this: how do those of us in the real estate industry who have crazy amounts of ambition, how do we think bigger than the building of our own empires? How do we create success and significance, income and impact? My name is Justin Stoddard. This is my co-host Stephanie Peck. And together we bring you the Think Bigger Real Estate Podcast. I will excuse my lovely co-host today. It's just me, and I get the great benefit to be with Chris Hossfeld. Let me tell you a little bit about Chris. Chris is a 20-year veteran. He was in the U.S. Army as a combat leader, and he now leads a company called Barrel Strength. Is that right? Am I saying that right, Chris? Barrel Strength, which really trains leaders on how to lead under pressure by even taking them to some of the world's most historic sites like Gettysburg and others to really teach them what others went through under pressure to help shape and form us. So, Chris, such a pleasure to have you here. Let me begin by saying thank you and for all of your brothers and sisters in in the military for all that you've done and all that you do to keep our country safe.
Well, thank you, and it's appreciated.
Great. Well, excited to have you here. Let's dive in. I know you're based out of Austin, Texas, and again, have a leadership company that services both sides of the coast, kind of the country as a whole. Kind of walk us through a little bit about your experience. How did Chris Hossfeld become, prepared to lead others through times of trial and leading in times of pressure? Give us an example or two of really what stood out to you and kind of preparing you to lead at that level.
So one thing I think is very interesting is the U.S. Army, or the military in general, actually invests time in developing leaders, not to do the job that they are in, but the jobs that might come next. Because in the trials of combat, you sometimes lose leaders and people have to step up. So you can't just be comfortable in what you do, your current role. You have to be thinking not only the job of my boss, but my boss's boss. And so I've led from the small unit platoon coming right out of college, managing and running and ordering around 30 people to do complex tasks. And then from there, I was a company commander. Now you're at about 120 people, and I take that unit to combat. I spend a year in combat, leading my company, as well as then becoming a higher unit planner, all the way up to commanding a battalion, taking 900 people, and it's a multinational organization operating in Afghanistan. So lots of opportunity to lead up and across, and also to provide mentorship to those that were my subordinates.
I'll say one theme that I see in the real estate industry, which is the audience we're speaking to today, is that occasionally they're not as good. Like the successful agents are good producers, and they're good at leading by example, but they aren't always as good at empowering other leaders. And maybe that's scarcity mindset. Well, if I train this person too well, they won't need me anymore.
Yep.
Right. And I think that there's some of that. I also think that maybe they just haven't learned how to do it, and the importance of actually giving somebody big responsibility right away. And kind of like you said, like right out of college, here you were, right, leading 30 people. And there's something about that I would say, if you're building an organization that's big enough to support the dreams and aspirations of great people, then that is the path, right? Is to give people opportunities, because as soon as a great leader doesn't see a path forward, or a great producer doesn't see a path forward for them, they go even subtly, even subconsciously looking for something else. Is that safe to say?
I really agree. I think you hit on a really good point. And for those that are in like a sales sort of oriented job, It's a bit threatening, right? To pass on the secrets of your success. But I think that if you want to be more than just a real estate agent, if you want to own or be seen as the person that caters to a specific area or to a type of clientele, whatever it may be, you have to build your brand. You have to build a team, and that requires empowering others to do things on your behalf. And you have to teach them those sorts of things that made you successful, how you look at things, so that when you're not around, they can do it. That makes the organization more efficient, more effective in the long run. And I think that those are some things that it's scary, but I think that doing that builds a better team. It makes people want to come work for your organization because they see themselves as being empowered on your behalf.
For those that don't know my story, I actually came out of the title and escrow world. And it was interesting. I now coach executives within the title industry and entire operations. And I was talking to a client of mine recently about key person retention. And, the conversation was very similar to the one that we're having right now is how do you raise up great people and keep great people? And the conversation that we had was centered around what you just described, which is giving them more opportunity, right? Because it's interesting because oftentimes leaders of organizations, they're so strapped on time, yet the challenge is that they're not actually passing that information along and raising up leaders. And a sure way to lose great leaders is to not give them opportunity, right? To not create a path for them. So not only is it essential in creating that brand and that overall business, not a job, but a business that you want, right? Keep in mind, a job is when it's just you. A business is when there's other people, systems, and tools that are enacted with you, right? So if you don't have other people working with you, then you really don't have a business. And so it was interesting because that conversation was around that of the most attractive thing to high producers is opportunity and knowing that they have someone who's leading them, who's looking to open up more opportunities for them than they can even open up for themselves. Like that's how you get loyal people is by actually developing them, right? Is that what you've seen as well, Chris?
Absolutely. I think it is the ultimate return on investment. If you invest in those individuals, whether they stay with your company or go out on their own, that is your calling card. The calling card of you as an individual, of your business, who you will want to attract to work with you. And then you're building a more successful brand, both personally, but also organizationally. And I think that is really a mark that makes someone different. It makes people want to work with you. Other companies that are maybe tangentially within your business. And if those other businesses or other individuals may not be in your world, but they go, that's the company, that's the individual I want to work with, because what they're bringing is something special. And I want to be a part of that. And I think that is what is unique. And that's, both in the military and the business world. Companies are the same as large scale units, the 101st Airborne Division, Band of Brothers sort of fame. People want to go to those units, those organizations, because it has a unique culture. It inspires people to be part of it. And I think that's what I try to do is I try to use that sort of historical perspective to help guide people through what makes those units, those organizations special, made them successful, and translate that into ways that you can apply to your business or, as a personal development or as a professional development for you or your team.
I would imagine, Chris, that you learned some of these in the crucible of being out in combat, right? Is there a certain experience or two that you might share with us where these lessons of leading under pressure really were really refined within you? Is there anything that you can share with us around that?
The easiest one and one of the best for me is my first real day in combat. There's a period where you replace another organization. and we got the opportunity to execute a mission set that required us to go to a location at a specific time because there's 11 other operations going on at the same time. I had to empower my subordinates to do basic rehearsals because we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know exactly what we were going to run into. We didn't know what the objective was going to look like until very shortly beforehand. So the training, the opportunities to create some standard operating procedures and their techniques, how they were going to do it, I had to empower my subordinates to do it. But when we first executed it and this vehicle hits a gate and I see my people go into the objective area and shots go out and every bone in my body, every fiber is thinking, I have just killed my subordinates, my soldiers in the very first moment of combat. Oh my goodness. And everything in me makes me want to yell on the radio, what's going on? Give me a report. Tell me what's going on. Or get out and go and do something. And instead, I took a moment. I looked around inside my vehicle to those around me. I took a breath. And this 19-year-old private, or actually specialist, who was selected by his leader, his platoon leader, to be his radio telephone operator, the person on the radio, calls back and gives a clear, concise report in a way that gave me all the information I needed to know in a calm voice. And that 19-year-old calmed me down, and it made me realize that I didn't need to be that really overly aggressive person in those moments. It taught me how to be a better leader. Right? And the great report was one enemy killed in action, no friendly casualties, and we're continuing our mission. In a voice about that calm. And what he did to the organization, calm the organization down, it allowed us to do what we needed to do. And I thought it's a great example of the crucible of combat. But that's something, when something's going wrong or you see maybe a report coming in that isn't maybe to your liking, how do we respond to that? Do we have someone that is in our office that helps us calm us down so that we can get through to the most important parts of what it is and allow us to be successful?
It's fascinating to think about what you learned from someone that was maybe a subordinate, right? Somebody who could have in that very moment done what probably the natural person inside of each of us would have done, which was be to fight or flight, right? What's happening, right? Or to run, right? Like our natural instincts are not to be calm under pressure. And I think it's a learned skill. Obviously, that individual learned at a very young age. But I think the invitation to everybody listening here today is when things don't go well, let's say you have a client who calls you and they're mad, right? Or you lose a listing, or you lose a teammate. Now somebody's recruiting away from your own organization. How do you respond? Everybody's watching in that moment, right? Are you all of a sudden throwing mud at people, right? Are you trying to smear people? Like that's the fight or flight that's inside of us. And what's actually attractive is somebody who does exactly what you described was exemplified for you, right? Which is stay calm, give a report. Here's what's happened, and here's where we go from here, right? I mean, that's what I'm distilling from this lesson, which is so much easier said than done, right? When the pressure's high. Walk us through how people can actually get good at that, Chris.
So part of it is, I think the most important part of it is relationships that build trust and communication, right? I think the opportunities to build relationships with individuals, having them understand you as an individual, how you need to receive information, what is the most important types of information that comes in, but the relationships build trust that then when things come in a way that you don't expect, you trust what that person is saying. I think that is probably one of the most important things. So how do you do that in the business world? It's, okay, how do you allow people to go out stretch their legs in a way that will build confidence in you. Part of it is sometimes letting them do things in a way that you're uncomfortable with. But if they achieve success, you can trust them to sometimes do things in a way that you don't expect. And that's okay. Or giving them the opportunity to do something that may have a little bit higher risk. And doing that builds trust in them, that you trust them. Trust is a two-way street. And I think that is really the most important part of the leadership. My name is Chris, and I have failed in that probably more times than I've succeeded. But I think that finding those ways to allow them to trust you as a leader and you to trust them as a subordinate, right? In things that may involve risk for your company. What level do you retain as a decision? Maybe I'm going to allow this person to make a decision on a real estate deal where normally if it was over maybe $1 million, you may not feel comfortable. You want to look at it first and say it's okay. Maybe now you're going to trust that agent, that individual, or that portion of your company to make those decisions on your behalf. And I think that is one of those ways to find those opportunities.
What I hear you saying is that it's exposure. You just simply have to put people, including yourself, in high pressure situations where there are things at stake to find the best in people.
Absolutely. Right. And it's not exactly it's not always the exact answer. It's developing the frameworks for them to make good decisions. If you can help provide a good framework and say, this is kind of where your left and right limits are, go forth and do great things can be a very empowering thing for people to do. And then as they grow and as they achieve success, you maybe take those and build them out a little bit more.
So it's not a matter of just pushing them out to sea and saying, good luck. It's giving them the framework first and then putting them in a situation where they get to deploy that framework. Is that accurate?
I think that is, and that comes from multiple repetitions. And how do you find those opportunities in your organization is something so that when you're not there, they can sometimes build the team as it goes and is going to achieve the things you want within the frameworks you've provided them.
So good. Where I want to go next, Chris, is how you do this, right? First, let's take a quick break. I want to hear a word from our sponsor, Pro Insight, who's helped make this possible. So let's listen to that now. Have you ever stopped to count how many referrals you give out each and every month to other professionals? Have you ever stopped to count how many referrals come back from professionals each and every month? My guess is that you don't receive as many as you send out. If that's your situation, I want you to know that it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, at Pro Insight, we've created a way for your preferred vendor list to be transformed into a steady stream of client referrals. If this sounds interesting to you, just send me an email at justin@proinsight.com and I'll send over all the details. All right, Chris, so you actually take people to historic battle sites. Is that right? I mean, part of what you do is, of course, you coach and train people how to do what you just described, which is how to develop frameworks, how to put people in positions where they actually get to deploy those frameworks. And then you actually take people on maybe special missions. Can you walk us through what that looks like? I think I find this fascinating.
Yeah. So a lot of us have heard, it was maybe one paragraph we read in our high school history about Gettysburg. Well, a lot of businesses have headquarters in and around the National Capital Region, around Washington, Baltimore, New York. Gettysburg is an hour and a half to 2 hours away, so I can take people there. And we'll walk around the battlefield. Actually, we'll drive to different locations and we'll discuss what are the sorts of the decisions, what happened there, but also provide then a framework of, Is that something happening in your world? I've also done this in Normandy, the Netherlands for Market Garden, which was a failure. If anyone's heard the term "it's a bridge too far," that's Market Garden. Great movie. Battle of the Bulge, Bastogne. May have watched The Band of Brothers, Where All the Snow Is. A great opportunity to talk about resiliency. Italy, Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. But in Gettysburg, I think it's a good framework. But you can talk about things like, how did confirmation bias impact the beginning of the battle, and what are the outcomes, right? Because when you look at a battle, you're talking about compressing the time of what are the critical decisions, what are the stakes, limited resources maybe, ambiguous information, but you have some measurable outcomes. What happened next? So how confirmation bias. Oh, have we ever had a toxic, absent, or politically appointed leader over us? Yes, I have. Many of us know what that does to an organization. But then you can ask someone who's a burgeoning leader, how do you recognize that in your subordinates? Ooh, that's a different. How do you identify those, and what does that do to the organization? And we could look at how those relationships, even between those different types of leaders, uh, impacted the battle. We could talk about narrative. May have watched the movie Gettysburg. Jeff Daniels plays Joshua Chamberlain, and he orders a bayonet charge. Well, we don't know if he actually ordered a bayonet charge, but the reason we think he did is because he wrote his own Medal of Honor citation, and he was an English professor. Who's writing the narrative of your company in today's social media, Instagram, immediate TikTok? That is your brand. That is your narrative, right? That's coming out into the world today. And then we can talk about leaders that ordered people to do very, very difficult things, but those subordinates, the subordinate leaders, trusted that that individual, although they were sending them to do something dangerous, and they knew the outcomes for them were not going to be favorable, but what they did would have significant impact because they trusted the leader. How do you become that trusted leader that's able to provide that moment? And you can look at it and then say, what is the framework within our company? Do we have the processes? Do we have the right people? Have we invested in the right things to be able to do and create the outcomes that we want in these types of situations?
And I'm fascinated by you taking people to these places like Normandy, right? I've used that in different talks I've given about how these young men flooding the beaches of Normandy and just being mowed down by Nazi Germany.
Let's stand there on the beach and look up, and I will tell that exact same story about the private who calmed me down. Be able to provide a framework when you're looking at the beach and the heights. You're standing at the place where Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan, right? The Verville Draw. We can stand there and say, what would it take to get people to go? It elicits an emotion, right? That really cements the thinking, but it also helps us really start thinking about what was the keys that led them to be successful in the end. And that in and of itself is a great question to ask yourself personally, but I also think to ask your organization professionally.
The key when I think about that experience, right, that these young men went through, and I think about what I've learned about being a successful business owner, is that even when, I would even argue, especially when it looks like things are not going well, in that moment, if the leader can see past the clouds of today to the sunny skies of tomorrow, just like the American and British troops did, right? How they could see that if we can take down Hitler and his army, then freedom will be extended to the corners of the earth, right? But if not, right? And I think in that moment, when things don't look good, it's especially requisite of a leader. And oftentimes this is where leaders show up and become leaders, is because they have that cool, calm confidence as if everything has already worked out even when it hasn't. And I think we as humans, because of our fight or flight nature, when we are in turmoil, we look for that voice that you described, that calm voice, and naturally you become a magnet, right? You become a magnet to people looking for surety in an unsure situation. So anyway, I don't know if you have any other comments on that, but
No,
I'm
that
fascinated by that experience you put people in, because I think it's so telling of what it actually takes to win in business.
I think so. And you can talk about things that were successful, why it was successful, um, as an individual, as a leader, and also how did that leader develop themselves to be put in that position. I think that that is a really good sort of thing that allows us to think about, as kind of that return on investment. What do I personally need to do between now and the next big thing that's on our calendar, whatever it may be, to be that type of leader that I've always wanted?
What's the most common answer that people give when asked that question?
There is no common answer. And that's what I love about doing it, because everybody suddenly realizes that they have potential blind spots, and sometimes it opens up those blind spots. And so for each person, it's a little bit different. The ones that I love is when the person says, I'm really good at being the executor, of doing the thing. I've got to figure out how to be that leader that knows the strengths and weaknesses of the people below me, so that I can utilize them to the best and fullest that they can be, while mitigating any problems that they may have, blind spots, lack of training, whatever it may be within the organization, and finding that way to do that that fits my personality. Am I that calm, cool, collected? Or I had someone say, I'm not that calm, cool, collected, and I finally recognize that about myself. That means I need to have someone very close to me that can help interpret that anger, angst, anxiety, whatever it may be, to the team, so that they recognize, here's the signal. They know that something's wrong. They know what's kind of needed, but then this is the person who interprets. And it's not about diluting my power. It's I've enabled someone else to help get the team going. And then that allows me, like that 19-year-old private, to step back and go, okay, all right, team, I'm done with my thing. 5 minutes. You all know that I need my 5 minutes to vent, do whatever. Now here's what we do. Boom, 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 and everyone knows what they need to do. I would rather have someone recognize that they don't do that, because then at least I know it's coming. It's when they don't admit to those sorts of shortfalls, that you start going, oh, is this someone I really want to work for? If they only do that occasionally, I can work with it, as long as they've told me that that's going to be the way they do it. I'd rather not work for that individual in the first place, but I will definitely work with them because I understand what's coming.
Yeah, they know themselves well enough to know what they need, where their deficiencies are, or just where their human natures are, right? And they've prepared the people around them, to not be surprised when they need to step back and take a breather and recharge and right come back again with kind of fresh set of eyes.
Right? Sometimes we know maybe it's I need to send that initial report by a text and then call them 5 minutes later so that they can get it out of their system without engaging with me. maybe that's a good technique. And we can talk about those, right? And people can say, I can say, hey, this is where I failed in doing that. And this is what it did. But I had other people that were able to work through those issues for for the betterment of the organization.
Yeah, I believe very strongly that one of the greatest needed things in our world today is leadership. And I think there's a significant deficit of it, in part because we don't have people who are being trained the things that you're training them. And also we are losing some of our moral ground in people that can be respected both in the workplace as well as outside of the workplace. When you have somebody that is trustworthy, right? They're the same person to your face as they are behind your back. The same person in the public when the cameras are rolling as when they're, in a private setting. When they have
Authentic
that
leadership.
Yep, when they have that kind of integrity, and then they learn the skills that you're talking about, I believe that there's unlimited opportunity for those people, because regardless of the technology that's being developed, there are still people who need to be led, and there's a deficit in leadership. So if you want to do the best thing for your business and your career, it's learn the principles of leading. Be a trustworthy person, number one, and then number two, actually learn the skills that Chris is teaching us here today, which is leading under pressure, being the kind of leader that's calm in the storm, and because there'll always be storms, and you'll have people that are flocking to safety. They're flocking to that calm voice of reason that has a plan and that has a clear vision for what's on the other side of the storm. That's the kind of person that people want to follow. Any kind of following kind of wrap up thoughts, Chris, as we start to wrap up the episode?
The only thing I think, and you're really hitting on it, an investment in your own personal and professional journey as a leader will make you want to invest in others. I am a success in business or in my military career, usually in spite of myself. It's because of the people who invested in me and the subordinates that I entrusted. Most of my success, I would say 90% of my success, is because of that.
Because you were willing to invest in other people. Yeah, I believe it. Chris, it's been such an honor to have you here today. Again, I can't thank you enough for your service as a veteran to our country. How might people get in contact with you if they'd like to learn more about your Barrel Strength leadership programs?
Yeah. So Barrel Strength Leadership, we are on LinkedIn. You can look at us, Barrel Strength Leadership. I will post little things, little snippets about history or things that are going on and how I think that it evolves in a framework. And then Barrel Strength Leadership, all one word.org is the website. You can see the different offerings I have and what I can offer as far as unique, immersive, experiential leadership experiences or strategic consulting and keynote speaking.
I love it, Chris. Thank you again. We appreciate it. And for those that are looking to up their leadership, there probably isn't a better investment you can make than in yourself. As one of my mentors says, don't invest in the S&P 500, invest in the S&Me 500. In other words, invest in yourself, become a great leader, and watch the opportunity start to unfold for you. So with that, my final request of everybody listening here today are these three simple words. You know what they are. They are go, think bigger. Chris, thank you for helping us do that today on such an important topic of leadership on this very special day of Veterans Day. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Justin.